you know what, I'm a player, but I'm also a fan too. You know, you like seeing when, offer sheets are happening, and obviously trades are exciting too when it's not you. And, no, I think it's good for the game.
Do you have a burner? Do you follow people with a burner?
No, not on that. No. No, KD here.
Okay, welcome to it. 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by GMC. Shramati, Friedman, Bukauskas, all with you. Busy night in the NHL on Thursday. 11 games on tap. A lot to get to there. The Thought Line is back. Also, you're going to hear an interview we did a few weeks back when we were in Los Angeles with Warren Foegele, one of the newest members of the Los Angeles Kings. All of that to come. But Elliotte, we will begin this episode with the news out of Big D. Big Jake Oettinger, a big new contract. 8 years, $66 million. The same 8.25 AAV that Jeremy Swayman signed. Linus Ullmark as well, but a max 8-year deal. What was your reaction as this was coming together on Thursday?
First of all, let me shout out the Islander fans who were upset that Sorokin is not given proper credit for signing the first 8 times 8.25 deal. When I tweeted out that Oettinger got the Swayman, there were a couple who made it very clear, no, he didn't get the Swayman, he got the Sorokin. And you don't want those Long Islanders mad at you. They've got long, long memories. I don't think anybody is surprised at this deal. It sounds like the representative and Jim Nill here. Jim Nill, obviously the GM of the Stars, and the agent is Ben Hankinson. It sounds like after this deal got done with Swayman, they kind of said, can we do this quick? And again, it's one of those things where I really think that this is the value of an agent, a good agent, is that it's okay for you and the team to talk. I mean, you can even tell the player you're not even talking, so the player doesn't worry about it. What they said here is we'll talk about it quick, so that if Oettinger likes it, we'll get it to him quick and we'll get the deal done. And if not, we'll shelve it. Again, I just think you don't have to tell the player. You can work at it and come to him when it's done if you get there. And what happened here, it's pretty clear, is Jim Nill said, hey, this deal just got done. How about it? And Oettinger was happy with it. I think the thing that's really interesting about this to me is that I think there was a point where in the Swayman negotiation, one of the issues became like a guy like Saros, who's at the high sevens. He's in a no-tax state, Tennessee, right? So the team goes and the team says, you know what? Here's a comparable. Here's a good number. And the player and the agent will say no-tax state. So you got to make up the difference. So because there were some people who said to me that they saw a case for Oettinger to go higher than Swayman, primarily because he's played 60 more games. Oettinger's approaching 200 and Swayman's at about 135. So that one more season and that extra season of UFA, which would have been part of Oettinger's deal, you could have argued that he could have had a higher number than Swayman. But first of all, Oettinger's happy. Don't screw with happy. Great life advice. Don't screw around with happy. And secondly, Texas, no tax state. He could look at it and say, you know what? Even though the numbers are the same, my take home's a little bit better. I don't think it was really tough for Oettinger to say yes to this. This doesn't strike me as anything contentious like Shesterkin's been. This one sounded like it was pretty easy. I would bet now that Dallas gets started on Wyatt Johnston. I think they're kind of moving down the line. And if you look at it, Kyle, like their young core, Heiskanen's in the 8s, Hintz is in the 8s, Oettinger's in the 8s. You have to look at it and believe they're going to say to Wyatt Johnston, if you want term, what do you think about the number 8-ish?
But you know what's interesting about that, Elliotte? Because you look at the Sagans and the Bens of the world, they're both north of 9. Like, it's rare you see it go backwards for the next wave of players. The salary cap's going up here.
It's a really good point. You have a really good point there, and I can't argue it. Your logic is good. I just think Dallas, this is one of those situations, I think, where the taxes absolutely help. And eventually I'm going to crowdsource this. Like I had one executive in the league who said to me, we need to solve this tax issue. Obviously, he's from a team in a higher tax area. And, you have the power to he said to me, you have the power to kind of get ideas. So eventually I'm going to crowdsource this. But this is a case where the taxes, I think, are a factor. And if the player is willing, then they can all go into this one area. And right now in Dallas, it's pretty clear all these guys are willing. They're all together. And I think they're going to try to do the same thing with Wyatt Johnston.
Makes sense, certainly when they're in a position right now where, back-to-back conference finals, and they seem to be putting together a team that's capable of going even a little bit further potentially next spring.
Are you picking the Stars to win the Cup?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying they could. Can't you see it? I know we're only four games in.
They're good enough to win. Power play's not going really well, and Peter DeBoer was not happy about it after they lost to Washington on Thursday night. But that's a really good team. And what they're doing right now is they're getting this group together. Their one core, like the Ben Sagan core, they're still going to be there, and they're still part of the group. But this young core is starting to build itself into the central part of the team, if it's not already. And it's clear that Dallas's plan is, we're going to have you all around the same number.
And the Logan Stankoven Calder Trophy charge has got plenty of momentum behind it early as well, which has been fun to watch. So, as you say, the Stars dropped their first game of the year on Thursday night to Washington, one of 11 games on the slate. Why don't we start in Florida, Elliotte? There was a couple of great games in the state there Thursday night, but you made a great point. We should shout out just the great hockey fans down there as well. They have been through a lot the last month or so with Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton coming through, particularly down in Tampa. How about the way, the Lightning, through all of that, have started their season, and the way the crowd has propelled them along the way?
I didn't know what to expect in Tampa in this particular game, simply because this is the second home game for Tampa. And, one of the things that happened here is they postponed the game on the weekend against Carolina. That's an easy one to make up. And ultimately, the NHL and the Lightning are going to do the right thing by the region. But when it's Vancouver and Vegas coming in, those are Western Conference teams. It's hard to get them back there. It's difficult, especially in a season where you've got the Four Nations face-off, shutting things down for a couple weekends in February. It's not going to be easy to reschedule those games. So if they were told they couldn't play, or they really felt they couldn't play, they would have postponed them. But you could really sense that everyone wanted to get these two games in. And you just never know what kind of crowd you're going to get. As you mentioned, they've been through a lot. People have got other more important things to worry about. But I watched a lot of that Vancouver game the other night, and I watched a lot of the Vegas game on Thursday. And just, as you said, shout out to that Tampa crowd in particular. Like, it was an enthusiastic sounding building. Kucherov has 6 goals already. That Vegas game was a great game. Like, lots of high quality, talented players going back at it. The Vancouver, Florida game was a great game. I was worried there for the Panthers for a minute. When Reinhart left that game, it didn't look good. And you're thinking, okay, no Barkov, no Kachuk, and now no Reinhart. Like, the way he went down the tunnel, you thought he was really hurt. But 2 great games. Really good hockey to watch, and Canucks get their first win. And those were the 2 best games I watched on Thursday night. I had one on the TV, I had one on the iPad. I was going back and forth, and it was good hockey. Tampa's coming into Toronto on Monday night. They play. And I'm really curious to see that one. Toronto's off to a good start. Tampa's off to a good start. They really don't like each other. There's a real undercurrent of dislike and distaste for each other. Now, they both have games first, but that's going to be an early measuring stick for both these teams because they really can't stand each other.
Okay, and elsewhere, Elliotte, just looking through the games we had on Thursday. So Detroit falls big to the Rangers. Buffalo gives up 6 to Columbus. I was at the game in Ottawa. They fell to the New Jersey Devils. That was a good game. Just Devils were the better team. That whole group of teams in the Atlantic, Elliotte, that wanted to take and had plans to take a step towards a playoff spot this season. I know it's early.
Yes.
Are you ringing any alarm bells yet?
I don't know if it's just recency bias because it's now, Kyle. But do you not get a sense that the panic meter is going off in a lot of places really quickly this year?
I feel like every season, the first 2 weeks of the year, there's more of a heightened emphasis on the results, particularly if they're bad, right out of the gate compared to the season previous.
Remember last year there was the Fire Lindy and everybody was like, okay, is this a real thing? But it always seems to me like it's in one or two places and everybody cools down. I look at about 5 or 6 spots right now where I'm sitting here saying, how serious is this? Like, let me ask you a question. If you had a choice, Ottawa's roster or Boston's roster, who would you take?
I'd probably... God, that's a really good question, Elliotte.
But it's harder than you think, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll save you.
Okay.
Because that's what podcast co-hosts do. They save each other. If you had a choice between Buffalo's roster and Boston's roster, who would you take?
Probably Boston.
You would take that one's easier for you?
Again, maybe it's my own mind.
No, I'm just
working
asking
with a bias, but I look at a team that's been in the playoffs.
This is not an interrogation. You are not a suspect in a crime.
I'm not under oath.
It's easier for you to take Boston over Buffalo than Boston over Ottawa.
Probably, yeah. And I think I would take Boston in both cases here. Who would you take?
Okay, but you thought about it, okay? I was talking to some people about this today. On pure talent, and we'll get into all the other stuff in a second. There's a point to all this. In pure talent, I was talking to several people who said they would take Ottawa's over Boston in pure talent. And they agreed that Buffalo and Boston was much closer, like you, but they thought about it. All right?
All right.
But the difference is you all come back to is that whether it's Boston's experience and you know what, if you really take a look at it, like the experience of the great Boston teams, like it's almost all gone now. But there is a culture there that's been passed. First of all, it's a high IQ team. And even though they got unglued last week against Florida, they are generally a high IQ team. And secondly, there is a culture that's been passed down, like Chara, Bergeron, now to their leaders, Pasternak, Marchand, and down to their group. And it filters through by osmosis. They're like, for the last 2 years, we've been sitting here and saying Boston is greater than the sum of their parts because we think they're going to fall off and they just find ways to stay there. Okay? Because they're a smart team, they play hard, they understand their system, they generally find ways. They're better lately than I think. We've been expecting them to fall off for years now, and especially the last 2 years, and they just never do. Okay? And like I was watching a bit of Buffalo Columbus tonight. Columbus is down Boone Jenner. They're down Goodbranson, Kent Johnson got hurt tonight, and it looks like that's going to be a long-term one too. We all know what they've been through, and we're going to talk about that a bit later, your visit there on Tuesday. But the one thing you control is your effort. And right now, I don't know how long this is going to last, but right now they are playing hard. Columbus is saying that no matter what is happening, we're at least going to go out and we're going to play hard. And, you know, I watched Detroit, and that was the thing that concerned me most about the Red Wings, is there wasn't a lot of pushback. What was your line about Panarin tonight?
Well, I wondered. So he's now what? Multi-point games every game so far this year. First time in Rangers franchise history, someone started the season with multi-point games in each of the first 4. Hat-trick against the Red Wings. And for this whole argument about what Igor Shesterkin's next contract could look like, the idea that he is the best player on the team, he should be the highest paid player on the team. I wondered if Panarin started to do the Rangers a bit of a favor here with how he started and making the argument of, hold on a sec. I was in the conversation for the Hart Trophy a year ago. I may one-up my points total from last season. Maybe I'm in fact still the best player on this team.
So are you saying that Chris Drury went to Artemi Panarin and said, we need you to prove that you're the best player on this team so we can keep Shesterkin's number down?
I'm just saying I haven't seen anything denying that.
You're just saying you can't prove that he didn't say that. So we're going with 50-50.
That's right.
It's a good theory. And Panarin does look great. But that's the thing. Like, that's one thing I always look at is who's pushing back. Even when you're losing, are you pushing back and are you competing? Like Colorado, like people are saying, like, is there any chance Bednar's in trouble? I'd be astonished. Like, I would be really shocked. I don't know if there's a coach that could fix what's going wrong. Like, they're thin and they're not getting saves. Like, no coach is winning under those circumstances. But to me, at least, Colorado is still playing hard. Like, I don't look at them and I don't say there's a team that's giving up. Like, those guys are still trying to play hard. I look at Columbus, they are playing hard in a really difficult situation. I look at Boston, they almost always play hard to me, no matter what is happening. And that's the thing. I just look at, you know, and I'm not saying people are quitting or anything like that. It's just that those, like, Travis Green was caught on the bench tonight in that Ottawa game saying, not freaking good enough, not freaking good enough. And I think what those teams just miss, I think, too often, and, you know, they have flaws and they have their own issues, but what they miss too often, I think, is they just don't have the pushback there. And that, to me, is what separates some of these teams. Even if you're not that good, you still control your effort. You still control your compete. And that's the thing that just blows me away about those situations. At times, I don't know whether it's confidence or what, but they just wilt at key moments during the game. And Detroit was definitely like that, and Buffalo was definitely like that on Thursday night. Like, Buffalo just looked really disheartened after that way the game ended the other night against Pittsburgh. And they had moments where they looked like they were going to get back into this game and maybe steal it, but they can't sustain it for long enough. I don't know what it is, but they can't sustain their will on these games for long enough. I don't know why that is. We've all been like, they have tried everything there the last 14 years to try to fix it. But that's what I see. It's just that there's moments in games where it's there for the taking. It was the case. They were winning against Pittsburgh. They were losing against Columbus. They had opportunities to win both games. And it's got to be hugely frustrating for those players and those fans. And that's why I asked you about, and the organizations, and that's why I asked you about Boston, because like, on pure talent, I think you're looking at some of these other teams and saying, yeah, I'd take those rosters. But the Bruins, like, especially the last 2 years, they are better than the sum of their parts. They're like, we're the Bruins and we're going to find a way. And and they did that again last year, and they're looking to me like they're going to do it again this year.
Yeah, I mean, think of a player like Charlie Coyle. I mean, a good player as he started his career in Minnesota, and what he's turned into over the years now in Boston, and certainly now with Bergeron not there anymore. But like, there's a prime example of coming into that environment, being around the culture that's being created there long before he got into town, and now he's one of the people that are carrying it.
Absolutely. And, that's another guy that people were always saying there's got to be more there. And he has found his role, and he has found his niche.
So interesting days already in the Eastern Conference, particularly in the Atlantic Division. And we should shout out Luke Schenn, 1,000 career games on Thursday night. What an accomplishment for him, for one of the true good people in the game. A guy that was seemingly on his way out a few years ago, started working with Adam Oates, completely turned his career around and extended it by a number of years. What's your read on the Predators out of the gate?
Well, first of all, on Schenn, the story I remember about him, and you talked about it when he was on waivers a few years ago, there was a rumor going around that he was going to quit hockey. And I heard that rumor, and I mentioned it to his agent at the time, and he called me. He heard that I mentioned that to his agent, and he called me. I won't forget. It was a Saturday night, and it was a hockey night game, and I was going to talk about it in the headlines or whatever we were calling it at the time. And he called me himself and said, you do not go on air and say, I'm done. Like, I'm not done. I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to stay. I love hockey. I love being in the NHL, and I will do what it takes. And as you mentioned there, he started working with Adam Oates, and it was a much different outcome for him. But I always remember that conversation. Just, it's rare that a player, takes the pain to call you mid-season and say, you need to say this about me correctly, or don't say that about me because it's wrong. And I thought that always stood out for me, and I always thought very highly of Schenn that he took the time to do that. As for the Predators, I think they're discombobulated. They were. I couldn't believe the other night against Seattle. It was 3-3, and then I looked up, and it's 7-3. And you don't think about Seattle having the kind of offensive firepower that they could do that to someone, but Nashville just broke down over and over and over again. Like, to me, I can see it. The Predators, they have that great first line, right? They have O'Reilly, they have Forsberg, and they have Nyquist, and they're keeping that together. And where you can really see the problem is sorting out how it's going to work from there. They had this night, they tried Novak in between Stamkos and Evangelista, and Marchessault was playing with Colton Sissons and Mark Jankowski, although it kind of moves around a little bit. But that after the O'Reilly line, they're really having trouble sorting out how it's going to work. And, Tommy Novak is a really talented guy, and I think they were hoping that he would be able to grab a hold of the second line center and prove that he could take it, and it's not working so far. Now, I was on Nashville Radio the other day. I do a hit there every Thursday, and I said, Kyle, that the thing about something like this is if you really want to give it a chance, you probably have to give it like 40 games. And they've moved away from it, and now they've moved back to it. And, you're 0-4, I think, for the first time in franchise history. And there's so much on the line this year. It's hard to be that patient. And what's one of the hardest things to find? I think I would say the two hardest things to find are a number one stud defenseman and a top two center. So it's not like it's going to be easy for Nashville to go out there and say, okay, this isn't working with Novak. We're going to go out and trade for a number two center. Like, those guys are really hard to find. I think they're caught right now between the season started, we're losing, we'd like to have patience, we need to have patience. We're just not sure we're going to be able to have enough patience here. But that's one of the issues with right now is figuring out how it's all going to fit behind that top line. Like they were leaky. They were better in this game. You know, the Oilers, all of a sudden, nobody is freaking out about them right now because they've won 2 games in a row. And that's all it does. All it takes. It's all you need to get people feeling better about you. But just how it's all going to fit is their problem. Now, Colorado, we mentioned them a few minutes ago. I had some people tell me that they think there's going to be teams looking at Blackwood from San Jose, Mackenzie Blackwood.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, Colorado, they have Georgiev, they have a Noonan, they picked Kakkonen off waivers from Winnipeg. I think they've looked into Blackwood before. He's been on their radar. Like, there's no way the Avalanche aren't looking at this and saying, what can we do? Like, how do we fix this? And do we have to go elsewhere? It doesn't mean they will, but they have to be looking at it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Blackwood is the kind of guy they're at least saying, okay, if we do decide to go this route, could he solve our problem? And I find it impossible to believe they're not at least looking at it, whether or not they actually do it. The other guy I wonder about is Gibson. And Gibson is still out after an appendectomy, and he's supposed to come back pretty soon. You know, the thing about Gibson is he has to stay healthy. Someone asked me today if Gibson would be the perfect tonic for what the Avalanche need. And in theory, the answer is yes, because he's a good goalie and he could make a difference. But he's got to stay healthy. And that's the thing. Like, it's always been the case with him. People look at the contract. The contract you can work out. If you think a player is good enough, you'll find a way to make the contract work. And the other thing, too, about Gibson, he's only got 2 years left. Like, people aren't going to be too afraid of that term if he can play. I just think that the health thing, he's got to prove he can play. But I find it hard to believe that the Avalanche aren't looking at the goalie situation. Like, no matter, Bednar is saying all the right things publicly. That's his job. Talk up the team. Don't let the boat take on water. Don't give anyone any indication that you're giving up on your guy. But it's the front office's job to sit here and say, what are our other options? And I just wonder if they're looking around at, like, when I looked at the goaltenders who could be available or might be available or would even make sense, you know, Blackwood was kind of the name that jumped out to me, that if a team's looking for a goalie, that's probably a guy who you can actually get. He's probably up there.
All right, speaking of goalies, you want to circle back on the goalie interference chatter we had for a little bit there on Monday's pod, and then a number of more instances of that throughout the week here.
Yeah, there was one I thought, like, as you heard me say, I think generally they're pretty consistent on that call. Although someone pointed out to me in the Wild Ottawa game the other afternoon, Monday afternoon, there was a play where David Perron's skate on the 6-6 goal, it touched Darcy Kemper's skate in the blue, and the Kings challenged and they lost. Now, I don't think it really interfered at all with Kemper. I just think he got beat. But someone said to me, you know, there was contact in the crease and it stood. And let me just concede, because it's a frequent listener of the pod, and I want to say respect for that, for keeping me employed. But I generally think that it didn't prevent Kemper from making the save. However, there was the ones that happened the other night in Vancouver, Tampa, and also Edmonton, Philly. That's where I think the league has to come out and make a video. Like, there is a video out there about goalie interference in the blue paint. And the funniest thing about it is the first shot is of Corey Perry. Like, it's Perry standing in on Bobrovsky. And you can find it, and it tells you, it's a very good illustrator of what you can and can't do. But I laugh that Perry's the first person you see. This one is harder. And I have a theory. Well, first of all, I should say this. The moment that Mishkov scored that goal, I knew Edmonton was going to challenge it. It is the goalie coach's job to sit there and say, I have to know the trends. I have to know what's been called. I have to know if I have a chance to get it right or wrong. I have to see what they're up to. Like an hour before the Edmonton-Philly game that night, the Eyssimont goal doesn't count. So the moment that Michkov scores there, I'm like, they're going to challenge it because they saw it. And they did. And no question they thought they were going to win. No question. And they lost. And I have a theory. My theory is if you look at that goal, Eyssimont has one long jam.
Right.
He jams hard.
Almost like he's trying to stab it in the net, like
yes,
through
it's
Shilov's pad.
It's one hard jam. It gets underneath the pad of Silov's, and he stays there. If you look at Michkov, it's not like that. He whacks at the puck several times. Like to me, Eyssimont is like you say, he's stabbing at the pad and the puck, and he's forcing it back. To me, Michkov is whacking away at the puck, and he doesn't knock Skinner into the net as much as I think he just wins a battle. Like he just beats him. He physically beats Skinner in that moment. But I don't know that for sure. I believe that to be right. I don't know it for sure. Like that's one where they've got to put it out there. First of all, they should send it to all the teams so they know. But secondly, send it to the fans so they know. Like these Oilers fans, they're so funny. They're so frustrated in that moment. They've had 4 disallowed goals. They've scored 3 of them all season. Like they've got more disallowed goals than they have goals scored. You know, some of them were kind of buying what I was selling about the blue paint. But the moment that one happened, they're like, explain that. The Vancouver goal just got disallowed like an hour ago. And I couldn't argue with them. I could not argue with them. Do I think my reasoning there is the reason? Yeah, I do. But I think that's one of those things where you've got to put out a video and you've got to say, this is why this one counted. This is why this one didn't count, so that the teams know, and it's important the fans know too. The people in the crowd have to be willing to sit there and say, okay, I may not agree with it, but I get it. And they've done a much better job over the years of explaining how some of these calls are supposed to work. Like we've come a long way. That's one where they should send out an explainer too.
Yeah. And I will say, on the written explanation they provided of the Michkov goal, they did mention that. Like it is in the rule book about in a rebound situation, if an attacking player's trying to play a loose puck, whacking at it, and there's incidental contact through that, the goal can still be allowed. So you were correct in thinking that may be the reason why that one stood while the Eyssimont goal was called back. Okay, Elliotte.
Yes.
So last episode, we kind of went down a tangent on awards voting, and you got a note about that.
Actually, you know what happened? I was at the morning skate in Toronto for Toronto, LA. And by the way, LA should get some credit too. They got absolutely pumped in Toronto. And they've been on the road, I think, for 16 days.
Yep.
So they've been away for a long time. And, you know, and though they haven't played a lot of games too. They played those 2 games in Quebec City, and then they played a few here, and now they're going back home, but they have to go on the road again, even though it's closer, because they don't have access to their rink yet to play home games. Let me give some credit to LA too, by the way. They've been on the road for 16 days, and they haven't even played a ton of games. They went to Quebec City. They opened with a few games here.
Left
They're
October
going
1st, I think.
Yep. They're going home for a couple days, but then they have to go on the road again, even though it's closer. And they don't have a home game till after they've played 7 on the road. And they get absolutely pumped in Toronto. And that game in Montreal, I know it's not exactly a long road trip. It's a short flight, but that could have been a real schedule loss for them. They could have been totally disheartened. They could have been absolutely beaten, and they went out and they beat the Canadians. Like, don't get me wrong, as we're talking about like Buffalo and Detroit and Ottawa here, the buzzards were circling over the LA Kings too after a couple of those recent results. Like the heat was turning up on those guys. And that was a gutsy win. With Byfield, by the way, moved back to the wing, which I thought was really interesting. But Joshua Cloak, who writes for The Athletic, he told me, he spoke to me at the morning skate, and he said that in MLS, they split the votes into 1/3. So one group is the executives, one group is the players, and one group is the media. And basically, each third has an equal say into the voting. So all the media votes go into the one bucket, all of the technical staff goes into another bucket, and all of the players go into a third bucket, and they weigh each bucket. And that determines the voting. And he just mentioned that he thought that was a good, equitable solution if you ever wanted to go down that road. You know, I'll say this too. One thing we were talking about, and I forgot to mention this to you, I don't think I could ever be an NBA awards voter. I just don't think I could. Do you know how the NBA awards voting works?
You know what? I'm not familiar.
Okay, so in the NBA, if a player doesn't get voted to enough first team All-NBA, it affects their contract. Like we're talking like $30 million. At least that was a couple years ago. There was a player whose contract max value dropped by $30 million because he didn't get first team All-NBA. I can't remember who it was, but I remember it happening. And I just said I could not vote for awards in those circumstances. I am never going to be the person. What's that?
I said, knowing that was what's at stake, potentially?
I could not, like, I believe people should have the right to negotiate as much as they can for a contract. I would not want to be responsible. First of all, could you imagine if I was an NHL player and you or an NBA player, because it's true, and I didn't get first team, and my contract dropped by $30 million. I know they still make a lot of money, but my contract dropped by $30 million because of voting. I would never talk to you again.
Oh, I'd be doing somersaults. No, I wouldn't.
Yes, you would.
That's fascinating. That is amazing.
So, but anyway, that's what he said. Because he covers a lot of MLS, and he told me, and I don't know what will happen in hockey. I don't know if that's even being remotely considered. But the one thing I still do feel very strongly about is even if they gave it to, say, NHL employees or team staff or players, it still all has to be public. That is the best thing that the Professional Hockey Writers Association does. All ballots out.
Totally agree. And I'm glad Joshua brought that up. He's a smart mind. One of the things I thought about the last couple of days too, once we discussed that on Monday, was like, what if you had, I don't know, maybe if you're a current player, does it get awkward? Like if you're Connor McDavid voting, are you voting for yourself? Situations like that. What if you had like a group of alumni that retired within like the last 10 years, and there's a committee of them. I don't know how many of them they are, but they still want to stay connected to the game, retired recently enough that they're still in tune with the way the game is played today, played with a number of players that are still active, and they come up with a certain percentage of the voting. That was another thought I had through all this.
Well, a number of them in broadcasting do get to do that. I mean, this could open it up to some people who aren't broadcasters. But, you know, I mean, I still say this. I generally think that the people who do vote do a very good job. There's always mistakes. I think there's a big difference between ballots that you disagree with and ballots that are indefensible. Like, there's going to be ballots I disagree with, but I think they're very defensible. I may not agree with the decision, but I'll say, you know what? It's well thought out. I think there are very few indefensible ballots. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, is can you at least look at the ballots and say, yeah, I get the reasoning. I think the mistakes have really cut down since everything went public. And I don't care what happens as long as it's always public. It's very important.
Yeah, just like your argument that being punched with the glove on is worse. Indefensible.
You know, it's funny. One of the people who said that I was stupid for saying that, there was a glove punch this week, and I sent him the video, and he looked at it and he goes, "That's a dive."
Yeah, the only proper response to that. That's good.
By the way, the only other thing I wanted to mention was, did you see Berube
The timeout?
tear into the Leafs when they got soft in the third period?
Yes, I did.
Boy, did the Leaf fans love that.
That was like, because Sheldon Keefe would do that from time to time, right? Call the early timeout when things still seemed to be in control. And that was kind of a new thing early on. It was like, oh, we haven't really experienced this a lot before. But it was more of a, we're okay. Still got how much time left? Let's get playing again. Different demeanor from Craig Berube in that moment, as things were starting to tilt in their end a little more and more, even though the game still felt out of reach.
The love affair between Leaf Nation and Berube is very high right now. This is it's the good post first date feeling.
Yes.
That's what's going on right now. Leaf fans and Craig Berube, they had a really good first date. Really can't wait to see each other a second time.
That's very good, Elliotte. Okay, anything else on your mind before we get to the final thought?
Well, just the one thing as we finish up wrapping up this podcast on Thursday night, Seattle has just exploded for 3 goals in the second period against Philadelphia. This is Fedotov's second start, and it's not going well for him. They have 2 weeks left before Kolosov has the ability to go back to the KHL, to go back to Russia. So I wonder if he gets an opportunity at some point here. You know, Fedotov is struggling a bit. Kolosov, they've got to make a decision. Just makes me wonder if we see him, as they're coming back from the West Coast, we see Kolosov at the NHL level at all. All right, normally Kyle does this, but we're going to flip it a little bit because we're going to talk about his travels this week. The final thought brought to you by GMC. And Kyle, you were in Columbus on Tuesday for a very, very emotional but beautifully, beautifully handled night between the Blue Jackets and the Panthers. What did you experience?
Yeah, it was heavy, Elliotte. It was. First off, like just watching all the fans come into the building before the game. I mean, you were shocked in a way by how many 13 Gaudreau jerseys there were there, only because he was only in Columbus for the 2 seasons, right? And so within that time, the amount of Jackets fans that went out and paid money to buy his jersey with just in those first 2 years speaks to the impact he had there right out of the gate, of course, and the excitement when he chose to sign there a couple years ago. Elliotte, I'll tell you, I'm not much of a spiritual guy per se, but you know, it was kind of a cruddy day weather-wise on Tuesday, the morning. It was a little bit drizzly walking over to the arena for the morning skate. Early in the afternoon, it was like full-on hail for a period of time, some heavy rain. The doors open hour and a half before game time, so 5:30. And as you know, at Nationwide Arena, there's like a bunch of kind of big windows around the exterior of the building looking into the concourse. And like right as the doors open, all of a sudden just this piercing sunlight is coming through the windows as the crowd is coming in. They had a beautiful tribute set up to Gaudreau on the concourse. It was a lot of the stuff that, you know, fans had left in front of Nationwide in the immediate aftermath of what had happened. You know, the sticks, purple Gatorade, the Skittles, all the signs and little individual messages that fans had took the time to write, and some of the Gaudreau jerseys that he had from different stops over the course of his playing days. And just seeing the sun come in there as the fans all stopped to take a moment in front of that tribute there, it really was something to see. I thought, you know, the one moment during the whole pregame ceremony, which was incredibly well done. I mean, of course, having the open space there on left wing at the drop of the puck, and the fact that it was Monahan throwing the puck over to Sam Bennett, the two ex-teammates of his, and leaving it there for 13 seconds. That was one, of course, but also just the shot of Noah's daughter in Meredith's arms as the banner's going up to the rafters, and she's pointing up, recognizing, her late father's name and number. And then the fact that when Monahan scored, he did the exact same gesture right away. That all hit me like a ton of bricks. It was incredibly emotional. It was, beautiful, but heart-wrenching all at the same time. And what was interesting was, I mean, the Jackets have done just a marvelous job through all of this. Dean Evison made the point in the morning that, when he was hired here, he heard a lot about, you got to change the culture here, and this has got to be better, and that's got to be better. And he's like, one thing I've learned since I've come to Columbus is there is a lot of really, really good people. That hasn't been an issue with this organization over the last few years, and that's really come through as they've navigated through all of this. Talking to somebody with the organization, Elliotte, I think there's kind of a figuring out as it goes on, because naturally there's been a lot of teams around the league that have reached out to say, what can we do in terms of when they go into their buildings and they want to honor Johnny Gaudreau in some way, and seems to just kind of be a balancing act between, the kind gestures, of course, that all of that brings about, but also allowing, the current players on the Jackets to, at a certain point, just go play too, right? So I think that'll be one thing that'll be sorted out as as it goes along.
I understand what you're
right?
saying there. Yeah. Everybody wants to do the right thing, but you worry about it getting to be too much. Like you don't necessarily want that for, 25 road games or anything like that. I understand exactly what you mean by this, and you're kind of tiptoeing around it, Kyle, because you don't want to offend accidentally, and the teams don't want to offend accidentally, but everybody wants to do the right thing, and eventually you reach a point where it becomes, even with best intentions, a little bit too much. And I can understand the delicate balance that everybody's trying to walk here. I mean, you go into every building at least once, so that's 31 road games. I could see like the Blue Jackets saying, 31 times, that might be too much. What's the right answer here? And it's a delicate balance to strike, but I totally understand what you're talking about here. I think everybody listening understands what you're talking about here, although we're trying to not to offend accidentally in the way we talk about it.
Yeah, Elliotte, that's the thing. Like, there's no playbook for handling all of this. There's really no playbook. What did you think watching it on TV?
I thought it was beautifully done. I thought everything about it was tremendous. I thought it was equally beautiful and touching the right tones that you want, I thought it was equally both beautiful and hitting the right tones that you wanted to hit. I thought the banner raising was incredible. One of Gaudreau's children pointing at the banner as it went up. That was a beautiful photo that was taken. I think we should also mention too, Calgary. They did a fantastic opening and tribute for Gaudreau as well last Saturday night. One of the things I heard actually was, Kyle, was that Matthew Tkachuk was supposed to be in Sam Bennett's spot. I think that was initially the plan. But because Tkachuk is sick and unable to play, obviously he wasn't there. But Bennett, who obviously played 6 years with Gaudreau, was a perfect person to go into that spot. And as Katie Engelson reported, it was Tkachuk who suggested that all the Panthers go in with purple Gatorade and Skittles because that's what Gaudreau loved. Like, everything about it was excellent and extremely well done by both the Blue Jackets in particular and the Flames.
Great. Okay, we'll leave that there for now. That was the final thought presented by GMC. When we come back, the Thought Line. You're listening to 32 Thoughts, the podcast. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Okay, welcome back. Time now for the Thought Line, a segment that seems to be growing in popularity week after week, Elliotte. Griffin Porter said he had tons of emails to sift through to try to curate for us for this episode. A reminder, the phone number to call, 1-833-311-3232. The email address, 32thoughts@sportsnet.ca. And we thank everyone who takes the time
thank
to
you
write
all.
or call in. Okay.
Hold on. Time out.
Go ahead.
Kyle, do you remember on the last pod when you said this?
The one thing I may take issue, when the league put out its explanation, it said Edmonton's Corey Perry had significant presence in the crease. I mean, I don't know if it was significant. It was significant the same way the triangle player is significant in the orchestra. But he was there enough. I have a vague recollection.
We have a note from a listener named Sean who wrote, I want to let you know that the newer host has offended an entire group of people, Kyle. He wrote that in capital letters. Kyle, you'll be lucky to keep your job. I had a bad haircut and was very awkward in high school. Know what that means? Yup. I was in the high school band, and because I didn't want to shower in my own spit, I played percussion. Know what I played, Kyle? Triangle. And people noticed. I had presence, baby. Why would you say that about such a well-loved group of people? Triangle players have made hits like YYZ by Neil Peart. You insulted Neil Peart as a Canadian. Come on. I bet you don't know the other famous triangle players. Kirk Herbstreit, triangle player. Morgan Freeman, triangle player. Nelson Mandela. I'm not sure on that one, but it sounds good. Be ready to be canceled. Triangled.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess I forgot. Because when we all think of Morgan Freeman, we think of the triangle. I forgot that part. That is fantastic. And I knew as it was coming out of my mouth, Elliotte, I was like, I'm going to pay for this, but purely was coming from the aspect of humor.
No, don't back down. Don't back down. You have once you're all in, you stay all in.
I'm not backing down.
Okay, good. I don't want any. There's no waffling. There's no backing down.
This ain't the Waffle House.
That's right.
This is IHOP, damn it. No. That's brilliant, Sean. Thank you for writing that in, and I hope you fixed your hair over the years. What a great way to start. Okay, so I'm following up with this, Elliotte.
That was awesome. Okay, yeah.
That was great. We're coming out hot here this week on the Thought Line. So remember how our episode on Monday kicked off with our discussion of cold pizza?
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Dylan from New York. Hey, Kelly Dom. I'm not sure about that one. It sounds too familiar to the nickname of the previous iteration of this podcast.
Yeah, Jelly Dom.
Hey,
yep.
Kelly Dom. Mm-hmm. No question this week, but just some wisdom to bestow. After hearing about Kyle and Elliotte's love of cold pizza, I felt compelled to share a pizza reheating hack that will change your life. No microwave, no oven, no cold pizza. Heat a frying pan on medium-high heat for 2 minutes, then add your slice. After about 2 minutes, add a spoonful of water and cover with a lid for 1 minute, then you're done. Pizza is crisp on the bottom, cheese is incredibly melty, and it is better than when it was fresh. You are welcome. I have never heard of this before, Elliotte, but Dylan's got my attention.
Yes, I am going to try this. We are more than happy to accept all of your recipes and food hacks. Send them in. Send them in.
Brilliant. Okay, now to the hockey stuff.
I'm going to try it. I will try it.
Me too. And we'll report back. Don will as well. He's already thrilled about the idea. Tony from Helsinki.
Oh,
Hi,
nice.
Kyle and Elliotte. Yeah. Watching Justin Kirkland score his first NHL goal against the Oilers at 28 years old, after toiling in the AHL for a decade, as the commentator put it, was a heartwarming moment. Seeing the player's pure smile on the bench after the goal made me chuckle happily. What a story. What other good stories that you guys might have about players playing for a long time in the lower leagues and getting a chance towards the latter stages of their career? Love the podcast. Go easy on Kyle, Elliotte. Keep up the great work. Anything come to mind for you?
Is this a relative?
Yes. No, Lithuanian background, not Finnish for me.
To me, a lot of the great ones, Kyle, are the e-bugs. And it's funny because I think the people in the league really are starting to hate the e-bug. They especially, and I kind of get it on one level because they know how hard it is to make the NHL, and they're like, that should be an NHL goalie who gets the opportunity to play, or somebody who's like the kind of thing that we're talking about, right? Like a guy who's been around the minors, hangs on, doesn't give up. They should get that opportunity instead of an e-bug. It's fun for the fans. There's been some awesome stories. I love the romance of it, but I know how some people feel about it. One of the stories I remember was when I was a kid, there was obviously a lot of mystery about Russian and European players. Not so much European. They started to come over when I was younger, but Russians for sure. And I remember going to a game at Maple Leaf Gardens. The Minnesota North Stars was there, and there was a player named Helmut Balderas. And he was a really good player for the Soviet Union for a long time. And he was the oldest player to score his first goal at the time. He was 37 years old. And I just remembered that story just about how here's this guy who got to the NHL at age 36 because of the way the world was at the time and finally scores. Like, I love that kind of stuff. There was another guy too, Warren Young. He played on Mario Lemieux's wing in Pittsburgh, and he was a Toronto guy, and he broke in, like he had a 40-goal season playing with Mario Lemieux when he was like 29. And he scored. And so like, it's guys like that. It's stories like that. People who battle, like that story the other night with Kirkland was incredible. Like the smile on his face was fantastic. And I forgot about the car accident too. Like you think of all the things that he's been through. I love stories like that. The other thing I like is the veterans who win the Stanley Cup. Like I remember when Dallas Drake won the Stanley Cup with Detroit, he was like a puddle on the ice. He was so emotional. And you see that player who finally gets the cup after so many years. That's something I really love too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, Ray Bourque probably the most famous
Ray
one.
Bourque, yep.
So the name that came to my mind was, again, under the topic of goalies, Elliotte, Jeff Glass. Because I remember him.
That's a great story.
Right. As the goalie on the Team Canada World Junior Dream Team in 2005. And as someone who, I mean, I was a young guy back then, and that team was, of course, very impressionable on me at the time, and how many players ended up becoming stars in the NHL from there. And as someone that didn't follow Jeff Glass's career closely, it's like all of a sudden you didn't hear about him forever. Spent some time in the American League. He was a Senators draft pick, went over to the KHL for a long while, comes back to North America, and at 32 years old, made his first start in the National Hockey League with Chicago during the 2017-18 season. Got 15 games that year, and then finished up with more games in the American Hockey League and part of one season over in Austria too. So that was the first name that came to mind for me under that category. It would be Jeff Glass.
All great ones. Like anybody who really, like you really love hockey if you're doing that. And anybody who gets rewarded, like that's like I was watching when he scored that goal, and not only on the ice but on the bench. You know, I was thinking to myself, it's a good thing that Ryan Huska's not putting him back out there, because there's no way he's going to be able to make a play. He's so excited and so happy, and it was such a great thing. It's what it's all supposed to be about.
Yes, and that's almost like it's as cool as watching the player living up the moment. It's the teammates' reaction too. Like Craig
Yes.
Simpson talks about it all the time. Like watching Michkov. I know there's someone just at the very beginning of his career, so the opposite of this, but get his first point against Calgary over the weekend on Travis Konechny's goal. And so Konechny buries it, and instead of celebrating, he like turned right to Michkov and put his fist out for a fist bump and said, "Hey, congrats!" Like he knew that was your first point in the NHL. I thought that was a really.
And then he
nice
went for the puck too, right? Like the next thing he did was go for the puck. Yes, they're so aware
good.
of that. Obviously, yes.
Thank you, Tony from Helsinki, for that question. Next, we go to a voicemail. Philip in Chicago.
Was curious, with Tyler Bertuzzi playing for the Blackhawks, but starting with the Red Wings, being traded to the Bruins, and last year playing a year in Toronto, has there ever been a player that has played for all original 6 teams? Wondering if that ever happened way back when, but seems very unlikely in this day and age. Thanks for the great show.
Well, do you have any name, Elliotte?
So, Kyle, the first name that jumps to my mind is an older player who won a Stanley Cup with Toronto and I think a Stanley Cup with Montreal, Larry Hillman. Like, he played for a bunch of the original 6 teams. That's my first guess.
Yeah, it's
How
a good
am
one.
I?
So Larry Hillman played for 4 of the original 6 teams. There's one player.
Just like Bertuzzi. Okay.
Correct. There's one player that has got all 6.
Okay. What era are we in here?
We are in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, I'm gonna make some guesses. I'm gonna 40s and 50s. I'm gonna try to see if I can think of anyone I can remember back there. Like, okay, my only guess, and I think it's probably wrong, but they were big stars there, and I think that they played for at least 2 teams. I would go with one of the Bentley brothers. I think they're both. Max is in the Hall of Fame for sure. I think Doug is too.
Not those guys.
Okay.
I'll give you one more hint. Kid line in Toronto.
Howie Meeker, Gus Bodner. So Gus Bodner's not, maybe it's a different kid line, but I thought he was on the kid line at the same time. Yeah, the only other guys I can think of from the Maple Leafs around that time would be like Harry Watson, Todd Sloan. Those, like, is it either of those guys?
Nope.
I'm out. I'm tapping out.
Okay, there it is. The late Vic Lind. From
I
Saskatoon,
gotta tell you,
Saskatchewan.
you could have given me 10,000 guesses. I wouldn't have gotten that. And no offense to
Me
Vic
neither.
Lynn, but I wasn't getting that one.
So he began his pro career. He played 1 game for the Rangers in 42-43. The next season, 3 games for the Red Wings. Then spent some time in the minors. Plays 2 games for the Canadiens in 45-46. Then he goes to Toronto. 4 years there, including back-to-back-to-back Stanley Cups. That's when he played on a line with Howie Meeker and Teeter Kennedy.
Wow.
Then a couple seasons in Boston, followed it up with, in the early 50s, parts of 2 seasons in Chicago to round out all 6. He is the only guy. Now, before we move on from this, Elliotte, there is one active player that has played for 5 of the original 6 teams. Tyler Bertuzzi's done 4. Can you think of who has 5?
So I'm going to be honest here with the audience. While we were taping this segment, I had to go and do a phone call, actually tape an interview with NHL Network. And I was totally distracted during my interview with NHL Network because I was thinking about this question. And I didn't
Yes.
look it up. I didn't look it up. You know, there were 2 guys who jumped into my head, and I really wanted to look it up, but I refused. I didn't want to blow it. One of them was Dmitry Kulikov, and the
Okay.
other was it's not Ben Sherratt, but that jumped into my head. Kulikov was the one guy who jumped into my head. Who is it?
No, it's not. You ready for the answer?
Yes.
Eric Gustafsson.
Oh man, that is a great trivia question. I never, you know what? I never would have remembered that. Never.
Well, he's tagged
Because he was part of
late.
2 deadline deals, right? Montreal and Toronto. So he barely played in those places.
And then New York last year and Detroit this season.
Wow. That is a great question.
Really good. So
Vic
thank you,
Lynn,
Philip.
Eric Gustafson, 2 people who have never been in my kitchen.
Those are their only similarities.
Wow.
Okay.
Great question.
Kat from Sudbury is next. Hello, Elliotte, Kyle, and the team. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and never miss an episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Emailing from Sudbury, Ontario, home of the Sudbury Wolves. I'm sure you have heard of Quentin Musty. We have. First-round draft pick of the San Jose Sharks a couple years ago. He was cut from training camp and returned to the Sudbury Wolves of the OHL. He chose not to report to Sudbury and stayed home in New York while awaiting a trade. Sudbury, I'm sure, without a doubt, are assessing their options, and they don't appear to be in a rush. My question is, can Musty move from the OHL to another league, like in Europe? The NCAA wants that all. The rule changes are finalized there, the BCHL, etc. All the best, and thanks for your time.
So the NCAA thing you're asking, that's being voted on in November, but it won't come into play until next season. They said it's not until a summer thing, so he can't do that now. And no, you can't just go from one team to another without that team's permission. So that's where it stands at this point in time, is that, he kind of has to stick with Sudbury until Sudbury works it out. Kat, I would say this. I don't cover a lot of junior hockey. I don't have the time to do it. But I did briefly look into this case, and I do think there is a recognition here that it's not a great thing to make the player sit. Like, I think it's reasonable for Sudbury to wait for the best, to try to make the best trade they could make. But one of the things that's been told here in the last couple of years especially is that as junior hockey is really under scrutiny, is there's a difference between, trying to make a good deal and simply make the player sit. And I believe there is pressure put on to make sure that the teams are actively trying to pursue a good trade. I will say these trades are complicated. I can't believe, like, these junior trades right now, like Kyle, like, this world better than me. It's like 2 players, a first, 14 second-round draft picks, 16 third-round draft picks,
That's wild,
and a truck full of apples. Like, these trades are bananas. So they are complicated, but the one thing I do know is a lot more subtle and not so subtle behind the scenes pressure tends to be put on to make sure these get resolved quicker. Nobody wants to see these players sit out like a year or anything like that.
Not at all. Kat, thank you for that question. Friedge will wrap up with Noah from Northern Alberta. Hello, Kyle and Elliotte. My question is, with Philip Gustafson scoring a goalie goal that happened to be on the power play, is that the first time that a goalie has been credited with a power play goal? Has there been a shorthanded goalie goal? Thanks, guys. So the answer is no, that was not the first power play goal.
There's been 3 power play goals, right?
Including his, yes.
Yes, I remembered that from that night. They said that was the third one. Has there ever been a shorthanded one?
There has been. There's been one.
It makes sense because the other team would pull their goalie, right?
Yep.
Oh, was the Hextall one? Was one of the Hextall ones shorthanded?
Yes, nicely done. Good
yeah,
recovery.
that one because that was in the playoffs, right?
It was April 11th, 1989.
Yeah, playoffs. That one was in the playoffs. I remember that one.
Nice. So there's only the one shorty from a goalie. And
John Hines, by the way, Alex Doherty, who covers the Predators, pointed out that John Hines is the only coach to coach 2 of these.
Oh, right.
Pekka Rinne. And
Was it Rene or was it Saros?
No, Rene for the Predators in 2020. And because if you look at it, Hextall scored 2, but one was Mike Keenan, the other was Paul Holmgren, and Brodeur scored 3 for 3 different Devils coaches.
Oh, nice. Excellent way to finish up. That was a fun thought line, Elliotte.
Oh, and I would also like to recognize a couple people who sent in some more notes about some of our previous thought line questions. Stephen Six pointed out the Stahl brothers in Carolina. Jordan, Eric, and Jared lined up 11, 12, and 13 once.
Oh,
and he
right.
provided a picture.
Yeah,
and
I think that was
also,
against Mark Stahl and the Rangers, right? So all 4 were in the game.
Well, that's right. Good call. And then there was Sean Kelly who pointed out some more full righty tandems. Garon and Mason, Theodore and Garon, McKenna and Domingue, he said, in Arizona. And he mentioned Vaucoun and Theodore in Montreal. So once again, we appreciate all of our great listeners sending us their answers and ideas.
1-833-311-3232 is the phone number to call. 32 Thoughts at sportsnet.ca. More 32 Thoughts, the podcast, when we come back. Okay, welcome back to the pod. As promised, our interview with Warren Foegele of the Los Angeles Kings. As mentioned early on, this was a conversation we had with Foegele a few weeks back when Elliotte, Dom, and I took a trip down to SoCal for a few days to spend a bit of time with the Kings. Foegele was very gracious with his time. We talk about his new life in Manhattan Beach and Los Angeles, his unique path to reaching the NHL, and of course, how close he got with the Edmonton Oilers last spring in reaching their ultimate goal of winning the Stanley Cup. Here is our conversation with Warren Foegele.
So Warren, I mean, talk about a complete lifestyle change coming down here to Los Angeles. I guess first off, like when you and your fiance got down here, what was the one thing you were most excited about, kind of your new world here in LA?
Well, I think we're just excited for a new adventure. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously, we're 5 blocks from the ocean, so that's kind of a new adjustment from coming from Edmonton. But I think we're both just looking forward to the new year and the new challenge ahead for both of us.
Quentin was saying that you've been asking him a lot of questions about the area. He said like he's almost like your vet, even though he's younger than you. So what kind of guidance is he giving you?
He's been great, honestly. As soon as I signed with the team, he's been there for me for all types of questions. It's kind of weird though, having a 22-year-old kind of tell me where everything is and what to do almost. But he's been a great teammate and a great friend, and just excited for the year.
The Kings are really counting on this line. You, Fiala, Byfield. What have you seen early?
That both those guys are extremely skilled and both very quick. I think for myself, I'm just trying to create space and use my speed and try to get them the puck more than anything and let them do what they do best.
We've heard just in our few days spending some time down here that Fiala is certainly how he plays. A little bit of a wild card, which can be great creatively wise. So as a line mate of him, like how do you go about playing off of that?
I think I'm not really too sure how to answer that. You know what? I just know off the ice he's been super welcoming. He's been a lot of fun to be around, and I find when you're close with your line mates, especially off the ice, it makes it much easier when you are playing with them on the ice. It's easier to give criticism or things like that. So I've already told him, tell me where you want me to go, and I'll try my best to help him out. But after that first preseason game, the moves that he was making out there was pretty eye noticeable, I guess. Yeah. But pretty skilled player.
All right, so is there anybody that you met here and you're like, I really didn't like that guy playing against them. And now that I've actually met them, they're not a bad guy.
Put me on the spot here. You know what? I'd probably say for 3 years, like battling in the playoffs, I think Kempe is probably the guy that was pretty annoying to play against. You know, he's a skilled player, but he plays hard too. And first day I got here, you know, he came right up to me and acted like there was nothing wrong. So, you know, he plays hard juice, and, you know, he's got a wicked shot, but he was pretty friendly when I got here.
Right. So then how long after you signed then did like someone address the elephant in the room and the history of 3 straight years in the playoffs, Edmonton and LA meeting?
I think it was more my Oiler teammates giving me a harder time than the Kings. It was kind of funny when I signed with LA that on July 1st, I had a couple of them come over up in Muskoka. I had Bouchard and Ryan McLeod come over, and my neighbor up there is Adam Henrique. So then he came over, and then they're like, you had to choose the Kings out of anyone. Yeah. So it was pretty funny, but you know, they obviously understand it's a business, and, you know, it was some funny laughs that night.
Nice.
You know, let's take you to the end of last year, because the Stanley Cup ends late June. You have to make a decision pretty quick. Can you kind of take us through those few days and how you ended up from Edmonton to California?
Yeah, it was a pretty wild week, right? Like, I think it was hard. It was really hard to make such a decision because of all the emotions of just losing in a Game 7 by 1 goal. You know, those are the games you dream of as a kid, is playing in a Game 7. And, you know, our team had gone through so much adversity throughout the year, you know, having a 2-9-1 start, and just how we were able to come back and, you know, almost finish off a really great year. But it was pretty crazy. I think just, you know, on July 1st, you're now getting calls from teams, and you just lost 3 days ago. So, you know, I couldn't have done it without my family and my agent, Joe Resnick, for, you know, trying to calm me down and, you know, try to make the best decision for myself moving forward.
What tipped it for LA? What got you here?
I think what got it here was just you know, them. I think any player, you know, when a team really wants you can kind of tell from when they're communicating with you. And on that day, you know, I felt that they gave me the best chance to, you know, maybe have a bigger role than what I had in Edmonton. And, you know, I think at this stage of my career, you know, I think I'm ready to, you know, provide more, and, you know, I'm ready for that challenge.
You mentioned just the people in your life that helped you be in the right frame of mind to make this decision so soon after the Stanley Cup final ended. So, like, how did you get to that point? Because I can only imagine, like, how you get to that headspace.
Yeah, I think the next day, you know, you grieve with your teammates, right? You know, this is the last day we're all going to be in the same room together as teammates. And then moving forward the next day, you know, you're packing up the house and, you know, getting ready to head back for summer. And I spend my summers in Toronto, and then it's just talking with my fiance Alex and my parents and my friends, my brother, and trying to, you know, make the best decision for us moving forward.
So the Amazon series is coming out as we do this, and there's a couple of moments I want to ask you about, because I think people are looking at it and they're saying, wow, like, these things are very powerful. And number one is McDavid. I guess it's after Game 2 in Florida, when he gets angry about the way you're playing as a team, not you specifically. But what do you remember about that?
Well, that game I was kicked out early on into the first period, so I was just hanging out with some of the other players that weren't playing that game in the dry stalls, and all you could just hear is loud noises. So I wasn't really in the room to hear all that, but you know, Connor's you know, very good leader, and, you know, I think he, you know, we needed that as a team, that message. It wasn't good enough. You know, you can't be down 2-0, and obviously we put ourselves in a bigger hole being down 3-0, but, you know, he demands everyone to, you know, work their best, and unfortunately, you know, that game, I think we didn't play our best. You know, we kept talking about we played a good Game 1, but we had to move on and focus on Game 2, and we just weren't good enough that game. And, he's our leader. Everyone looks up to him, and he expects us all to perform to the best of our capabilities. And he's just trying to win, just like the rest of us. But it was a good message from him.
How often a year does that happen?
Not very often. I think that just shows how competitive he is, and we were just, we're at almost the finish line, and it's time to dig deep. And it was the right message to be sent.
And so then, post Game 7, gosh, I don't mean to ask you to relive that, but given how much of a focal point and just the human interest, I think, in that scene and being able to see it, what was it like?
It's I don't really know if there's much words to it, right? You're trying to process that you didn't get the goal that you've been chasing your whole life as a hockey player, and then you're thinking, like, this is the last time maybe this whole group's together. There's so many emotions going through your head that it's not fun being on that side. That's for sure. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I think, be more fun to be on the other side. That's for sure.
We were talking the other day, and there is a play that you remember from Game 7, right before the 2-1 goal, that you think about. Can you explain what that play was?
Yeah, right before they scored their second goal, I think Leon passed it down to me, and I just took it to the net, and the puck's bouncing around. It's just laying on the goal line, and I think Holloway's looking, but he can't see, and I think Kulikov just knocks it away. And it's just, I learned a lot from my time in Carolina through Rod Brindamore, always talking about, like, game of inches. And, the puck is just right on the goal line, just inches away from maybe going in. And next thing you know, they break out the puck and they score on a 3-on-4. So going through my head, I'm just like, wow, what if that went in? Like, then maybe we have the lead. It changes everything, right? You can talk about many plays during the whole game of inches of what could happen, but for myself, that's one that just sticks out. Like, oh wow, imagine that went in, then we're up 2-1 instead of being down 2-1.
So, okay, I we look at your journey as a player, and it's clear just talking to you, your competitive edge, your desire to win. When you think back to your life in hockey, who are some of the names that come up in your mind that shaped who you are as a player and just the way you view the game?
I'd probably say my brother Reese.
Oh yeah,
is a big part of it. He was my older brother, and all his friends played road hockey, and a lot of battles out there, and they would let me play. I'd be the youngest one, and as a younger brother, you just hate getting beat up.
And did those guys beat you up?
Oh, they beat me up. They always put me in net. And I'd do anything just to play with them, right?
Right.
So he's a big part of why I played the game, and we would talk hockey for days. We'd watch Hockey Night in Canada, and try to pretend we're players and mini sticks and things like that. But he's definitely a big reason why I got into the sport and why I'm so passionate about hockey. And then probably to making it to the NHL would be my dad, who kind of just always told me, like, in life, if you don't work hard, you're never going to go anywhere. And I feel like my whole journey is all about working hard, and that's kind of how I've made it here. And I couldn't have done it without their support.
As you were rising, like, was there a point when you were playing with your brother's friends that they noticed that, well, they let you out of the net, number one, and number two, they noticed that maybe you were better than them?
They probably realized that, but as probably the older brothers, they would never admit that, right? A lot of road hockey, a lot of mini sticks, but they're my biggest supporters. My mom too, and my fiance Alex. I'm pretty fortunate to have people surround me and support me, and you need that because not every day is going to be. There's gonna be bumps in part of the road, during the hockey season, and you need your family and friends to be there for you.
Now, you had a pretty unique path. You played prep hockey at St. Andrews, and then you went to the NCAA, and then you went to the OHL. And one of the things I've learned just around sports is that it's not always linear for people. As a matter of fact, for a lot of people, it kind of bumps around here and there. And I'm curious about the choices you made on your path, and if you were ever worried that the choices you were making weren't going to get you where you wanted to go.
Yeah, so I started off, I wasn't drafted to the OHL in minor midget. So then I said, okay, I want to go play prep hockey. So I played for St. Andrews College, and Coach Dave Manning was a big part of my success there. Gave me so much confidence, instilled a good work ethic, and things like that. And from there, I committed to the University of New Hampshire. I went to University of New Hampshire for a year and a bit, and I wasn't really playing that much. And I kind of came to a crossroads where I was like, if I want to make it to the NHL, I feel like I should be playing with the guys that are, at that time, like I just thought, all the really top players that were my age were playing in the OHL. And I was like, I think I should go play with those guys, and maybe I'd get more of an opportunity to play because I wasn't really playing much at college. And that was a pretty hard decision because, my parents really wanted me to get an education, and I think it was just one day I just kind of called them and said, like, no, I think I want to go to the OHL. And I was drafted by Kingston, and I kind of made that decision on my own.
What was the phone call like?
I think my dad understood. I think it was harder for my mom. She really wanted me to get that degree. And I kind of just told her, like, you know what, I think I believe in myself. I think I can make it to the NHL, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I went to Kingston, and I had Coach Paul McFarland, who was crucial for me. He really helped me put myself back on the map, and had a good year there. And then eventually I got traded to Erie with Chris Knobloch, who I had last year in Edmonton, and we were able to win an OHL championship together. So it's definitely not a unique route to get to play college and junior, but for myself, it was probably the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
Now, what's your mom's name?
Leslie.
And have you promised that, well, first of all, what were you studying at New Hampshire?
Business.
Okay, and have you promised her you'll get the degree?
Yes.
So I got to tell you, don't be embarrassed, because I'm a credit and a half shy of my degree, and I'm like 30 years older than you. I still don't have it yet. So St. Andrews College, like, that's a good school. Were you a top student there too?
I was a scholar. I wouldn't say I was a top student.
What were you good at?
I thought I was pretty good at like math, and business was something that I really wanted to pursue. And my dad was in business, so that kind of made me kind of want to do that as well. So I knew I did not want to participate in science, so I wasn't going to be a doctor.
But you probably learned a lot about yourself going through that scenario of leaving college to go back to junior and the decision that you made.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone through a lot of adversity, and I feel like a lot of players do too. Like kind of Elliotte said, it's never really a straight line, and I've been pretty privileged to have like I said, my family and my friends in my corner, and they've been some big supporters for me because there's times where it just hasn't been easy. And I think the one thing I'm really proud of was sticking through with it and not quitting. And I think going to the OHL is probably a big reason of why I'm in the NHL.
So you go to Carolina, that's where you break in, and Rod Brind'Amour, I know you like the guy. What were your first interactions like with Rod Brind'Amour? Was he happy with your fitness?
I think so. I don't know. I don't know if I was beating him because he always participates with the fitness testing. And I remember looking at him when he was on the bike, and I'm like, oh boy, like I'm in for one. But Rod is someone I really respect. I think everyone respects him, and he gave me that chance to play in the NHL, and remember my first year, I wasn't really producing that much, but for him, it was about just playing the right way and, always competing. And, I'll forever be grateful for that. And, I think any player who plays for him would, go through a wall. And, he's always honest. And I think that's what I probably respect the most about him is, it's just pretty black and white with him. He'll tell you how it is. And, nothing better than hearing it like that, right?
What was the hardest thing he ever told you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I get a little, trying to think here. I think with him, sometimes he gets upset with turnovers, and sometimes I see some other skilled guys do it and think I could do it myself, and he would have to put me in check. And, Justin Williams was pretty good at that too with me. He'd be like, we're skilled grinders. We're still grinders. So each time I'd have a turnover, he'd always say that to me. And, but yeah, I was pretty privileged to play with some great leaders there, Jordan Stahl as well. And I was surrounded by some really good people there.
Okay, I think what's become one of the great stories, interesting stories of this summer was the day of the offer sheets between Edmonton and St. Louis and the group of players that were skating in Toronto. You were there, a number of Oilers were there, Robert Thomas of St. Louis was there. Can you give us your account of that?
Because there seems to be some dispute about what happened.
I think I'm going to side more on Robbie Thomas' side. I think that was a pretty entertaining day for myself. Yeah. Just because with all the commotion going on, I think there was 4 or 5 Oilers there, and as a former Oiler, I was trying to stir the pot up. Yeah. I remember I texted, I think Zach Hyman and I were sitting together getting treatment, and I ended up texting Brett Kulak because he doesn't have social media, and I said, hey, you may have to call your agent with the news today. And he says, what do you mean? So I sent him the screenshot that Halsey and Broberg got offer sheeted. So he immediately FaceTimed Zach and I. And I said, yeah, I think you're on the block again. Like, it's kind of a relationship him and I had in Edmonton where we kept joking with each other. Yeah. Who's getting traded between the both of us. And I don't know, it was a pretty funny day for me just seeing the chaos. But yeah, I think it's kind of great for the game, to be honest. We're in August and we're talking about offer sheets. Yeah. And, it's pretty exciting when fans and players are all talking about that. So I don't know how executives feel about it, but it was a pretty funny day. And I don't know if they were angry, but the guys at the gym, but there was definitely some tension there. There's no question. There's no question. Maybe they'll kill me for saying that.
Well, they're going to kill you anyway.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you're okay now. Yes. It's all okay. Well, let's talk about the Kings, where you are now. Byfield, who we brought up earlier, I wanted to ask about him because you know him a little bit in skating in the summers. 22 years old. What do you think he's capable of this year?
I think he's going to have a strong year. I've trained with him now for 3 to 4 years, and I thought this summer he looked determined, like he's ready to go on a mission. He's so big, so fast, so skilled, and I think him going back to center is going to be really good for him because that's something he's real comfortable with.
Right.
Is it going to be weird for you to go into Edmonton for the first time or line up against those guys for the first time?
Probably, yeah. I think it'll be. I don't know. I think, it'll be weird. It'd be weird not to say it wouldn't be weird.
Yeah. It's a great line.
But at the end of the day, I'm a competitor, and they're competitors too. And a big part of my game is competing, and I don't like to lose. And so we'll be friends off the ice. But once that puck drops, it's war. It's on. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited for that. Yeah, it's fun to go against them.
The 2 guys that everybody says are the Kings. There's Kopitar and there's Doughty. Kopitar, the quiet leader, the calm presence. Doughty, the loud, boisterous personality. Both Hall of Famers. Fortunately, Drew just got hurt. Going to miss a bit of time. But what have you noticed about both those 2 guys now that you're on the same side as them?
They're both just great people, I think, on and off the ice. And, I haven't got to know them too well as I just got here like 2 weeks ago, but you can tell they still have the desire to win. Those guys are competing out there hard in practice. And, I look forward to, getting to learn a lot from them. You know, they're 2-time Stanley Cup winners. Obviously, Drew's won in the Olympics. But they're elite players, and they've been playing in this league for, I don't know what it is, 16 to 19 years. It's pretty cool to, you know, hang around guys that have played in the league for that long, and, you know, try to be a sponge and soak up as much information as I can.
In the little bit of time you were here, were you on the receiving end of anything from Doughty? Like anything, any comments or any loud barbs or anything like that?
I think he made a joke about how he blew me up like 2 years ago in the playoffs. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I said, I tried to get you back last year, but I don't know if I got you. And he kind of said, no, I don't know what he said. He said no, and I was like, all right, well, there we go. But, yeah, it's funny. I've been playing against those guys for the last 3 years, so it's nice to now be on their side.
Yes. I understand you came into this year talking a big game after your fantasy football triumphs last year in Edmonton. But a tough start out of the gate here with your new team. What's it like? I imagine that's got to be one of the better ways to get to know your new teammates is fantasy football.
Yeah, for sure. Well, last year I won at Edmonton.
Yeah.
So I come in here to LA and I tell everyone I won, and now I think I'm in last place with the first overall pick at McCaffrey. And
That is
fell into the trap.
yeah. Like there are a lot of people listening to this who play fantasy football who are going to identify with you because McCaffrey has blown up their seasons.
Yeah, I'm in shambles right now. There's no question. I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do, and we got to figure out what the punishment is for last place, so make sure I'm not last.
Yes.
So there's some rumors about waffles and things like that. So, but no, it's a lot of fun. I love watching football, and like you said, it's a great way to interact with the guys, especially coming from a new team.
Right.
Last one for me, Warren. When I remember last year when we were chatting at times during the playoffs, one of the Oilers players said to me, Warren Foegele is the guy in this room who is most on top of what's happening in the league. You love knowing about what's going on in the league. Is that true?
It's probably true. Yeah, I think I love the sport. You know, I love watching games. I love, you know, keeping up what's going on. I'm trying to think if there's another guy on that team. The funny thing is there's a couple guys on the Oilers who say they don't keep tabs, but then they know everything. So
who are we talking about here?
I'm not going to say names, but there's a few that say, oh, yeah, I'm not sure. And then they know all these things. So, but I'd probably agree to that. You know, I love watching the game. I'm super passionate. You know, it's something probably after hockey, you know, I'd love to stay in the game. You know, I just a huge passion for it. So I like to keep tabs. You know, I'm a player, but I'm also a fan too. You know, you like seeing when, you know, offer sheets are happening, you know, and obviously trades are exciting too when it's not you. And, no, I think it's good for the game.
Do you have a burner? Do you follow people with a burner?
No, not on that. No, KD here.
Great. We hope you have a great year, Warren. Seriously, thank you so much for the time. This has been great.
No, awesome. Thanks for having me, and hope you guys are enjoying California.
Okay, yes. One final thank you to Warren Foegele for his time down in LA. A thank you to the crew we had on site there capturing the audio and the visuals during our conversation with Warren. Coming up, Hockey Night in Canada is back on Saturday. We have an early game kicking off the day. Tampa is in Ottawa at 1 o'clock Eastern. That game can be seen on Sportsnet. Hockey Central Saturday comes your way at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. The Rangers are in Toronto, an early heavyweight tilt in the Eastern Conference. The Canadiens are on Long Island. The Canucks continue their road trip into Philadelphia against the Flyers. The late game on Hockey Night this Saturday, Seattle Kraken hosting the Calgary Flames. Plenty of great action to keep you occupied and entertained over this weekend. Enjoy it all. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.